Hi, I'm Vani Shukla. Welcome to Garden and Nature Southwest. I'm talking about spring bird migration today. Spring is such a beautiful time of the year. There's so many colors in nature. Ocotillos are blooming right now in my area. Rainbow cacti are also starting to bloom. But another reason this is such a fun time of the year is because you get to see so many different birds that you usually do not see throughout the year. And that's because so many of these birds are stopping by only for a few days as they're migrating north. They're flying hundreds or thousands of miles. And on their way, either they may stop by for a few days just to recharge, just to energize, get some food, get some rest, and then continue their journey northwards, or they may hang around for a few weeks till the weather up north gets a bit warmer, and then they'll move on. There are some species that might make it their destination here, that may nest here. So in any case, spring is such a nice time to see and find those new birds that you usually don't see year-round. And my goal with this episode is to pass on the information that I have so you can enjoy this migration event to its fullest. Specifically, in this episode, I'll be sharing information on a very important program, a very important resource that can help you locate where the hotspots are for birding. Not only that, it can also predict in advance how many birds are flying through your area each day. It will also tell you about the peak migration times. So this is a very useful resource, a very important program that I'll tell you about. Also, I want to talk about the things that we can do in our own garden and yard to help these migratory birds. And for many of us, we may not have any garden or open space. It may be an apartment building where there's no open space. Even in those circumstances, we can do certain things to help these migratory birds. So let me first tell you about this program. It's called Birdcast, as in bird forecast. So it's called Birdcast, and their website is birdcast.info. I will put the link in the show notes. This is a really good website. On this website, you can find various maps. On one of the maps, you can see the dates that peak migrations are predicted. Another very interesting one is to see the live migration maps in real time as the migration is happening. They do it with the help of radars. So this advanced technology now helps them quite a bit to come up with these kind of maps. And also there is forecast map that will give you a prediction on how many birds are going to be flying through the area. Now, all this information that they provide on their website, the data that they have collected, the radar systems, the computer systems that they're using, how is it useful? It's not just for fun. It's not just for finding out how many species you can see outside, but it actually is so useful to help with the migration, because with this data, you can help modify the human activity that is taking place on the ground, especially during the times when the migration is going to be really heavy, when there are thousands of birds passing by. Maybe some of the activities that we do on the ground can be modified. For example, if it's a wind turbine farm and thousands of birds are passing through that region, if a prediction could be made ahead of time, then maybe communicating with that farm, maybe stopping the wind turbines for some time during the peak migration. Lights can be turned off in the tall buildings, the skyscrapers, downtown buildings. So all these modifications on a large scale are possible, not always carried out, but definitely possible, and not only on large scale, but also at individual level. When we know the times of the high bird migration, we can be more diligent about putting food and water outside, turning off our lights, the indoor lights, the landscaping lights, the floodlights, if you have any. Turning them off can make a difference, because when these birds are flying at night and they see all these city lights, that's not in their nature to find lights on the ground. So they can get disoriented, they can get lost, confused. So as much as we can, if we can keep the lights off or at a low level, it would be a big help to these birds flying at night. Also, the indoor lights, either we can turn them down or have the shades and the blinds down so that minimum light is going outside. So this is definitely a good website to check out. And if you're planning an outdoor activity on the weekend, you want to go see birds outside, it will also tell you what regions are hotspots, how many birds are predicted in that area for that day or for the next day. And that will help you plan for any birding activity that you might want to do over the weekend. And just for fun, try out different cities, and it'll be fun to see what kind of migration is happening in those areas. 2 days ago, I checked different cities like San Antonio, Phoenix, Denver, and some of these locations had high migration alerts. They had very high intensity of migration. So high migration alert or high intensity of migration happening versus medium intensity or low intensity. And they will also give you the number of birds. You can also find some other information like how many species of birds are predicted or how many different species of birds are migrating through that area. That kind of information is also available. So this program has been there for more than 2 decades, and this is a collaboration of a number of well-known entities like the Cornell Lab of Ornithology, also Colorado State University, UMass Elmhurst, Oregon State University. And if you go to their website, you'll find so many other organizations and universities that are partnering with them to make this program possible, and also volunteers. So not only the scientists that are working in these universities and in these organizations, but also the individual citizens who put in the bird sighting information. And actually, if you're familiar with the app eBird, that also used to be a major contributor, still is, I think, which made it a lot easier to report the bird sightings. And then, of course, the computer technology, the artificial intelligence, the satellites, the radar, all that continued to advance to present day now that they're able to make such accurate predictions, such accurate mapping. So I find this really fascinating and definitely a place where technology can be so useful to nature conservation. And all the data that they're collecting, all the information that is available, also helps manage the habitat on a much larger scale. So just for some background information, the migration path all the way from Mexico through US to Canada, all that region from south to north is divided into 4 flyways. And this is just for the purposes of management of the land under the flyways, or management of the environment under those flyways. There are several organizations that cooperate to manage the environment, to make the migration successful, to help the migration, to help the bird habitat. And again, you will be able to find the maps on the website, and I'll put the link down in the show notes. So the main organization, the federal one, is the U.S. Fish and Wildlife, but that does not work in isolation. It has to cooperate with so many other organizations, which are local organizations or at state level, or even international, because of course Mexico and Canada are involved. Each state under any given flyway is providing the input to the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Department about what the habitat conditions are, how many birds are there, what kind of habitats being lost, how's the situation regarding the pollution, the air pollution, or what's the situation regarding the various water bodies that might be there in the region. So each state is participating. And of course, where do the states get this information from? From the local towns and the cities and the local and the smaller geographical regions. So that's where I think our input as individuals, as citizens, can be helpful. Our interest in nature, our interest in the bird habitat can be helpful even when we are not part of some organization or doing something major for their habitat, even when we're not involved in those kind of activities. But even just having that interest in nature, just going out to those sites, that can be an incentive for the city or the town to preserve those sites. And what are those sites? Where are you more likely to find bird habitats or more number of migrating birds? Any place, even if it's small, any place in town or even around your city where you have any water bodies, even if you're living in really dry desert, sometimes in the city or a few miles away from the city, you might be able to find either a natural spring, it might be a pond, or you might have a river in your town, or there might be an area in the town where a lot of rainwater collects and it might have a different kind of vegetation and a lot of thick vegetation. So basically, any area that has a lot of thick vegetation, and especially if it's near a water body, there are more chances of migrating birds going over there, because those are the areas they're more likely to find good amount of shelter with the thick vegetation. And not only that, they will have plenty of food for their young ones or for themselves, a lot of insects, caterpillars, and other natural berries, etc., in that thick vegetation. So any spots, even if small, but that are with thick vegetation and near water bodies, those are definitely going to be the hotspots in your local region. Now, apart from these areas, there's also a high likelihood of the birds going to any greener neighborhoods where there are lots of green trees, or where there are city parks with lots of trees and bushes, lots of vegetation. Those will be other areas where you can find birds. When we also take interest in maintaining those areas, when we are showing interest, we're visiting them, we are planning our outdoor activities in those parks, on those sites, then again, that gets noticed by the city, and they're more likely to pass that information to the state agency, to the federal agency. So, yeah, it can have that trickle effect. But not every time that you're going birding, you have to have that bigger purpose in mind. Just go out there and enjoy and see those beautiful birds. It just unexpectedly, when you see that beautiful, colorful bird that you never see the rest of the year, it just makes your day. Apart from all these areas in your town, the most convenient one is your own yard. But the key is to go out every day, because they are so easily missed. These do not often come in big numbers as the finches or the pigeons and the doves do, and they take over your bird feeders. You don't see wild birds coming like that. Only occasionally you can have flocks of birds that come by, which can be easily noticed, but you still have to look out the window. So you have to keep an eye on that, and you have to be mindful that this is the time of the year that the birds are migrating. So spend more time outdoors. Do your routine activities outdoors. Every morning, go out with a coffee and keep your camera, keep your phone with you so that you can take some pictures. Keep your binoculars with you. Especially in the mornings and the evenings, there are more chances to find these birds. And also, you want to have fresh water for them every day. Clean the bird baths every day. Putting out food might be helpful, although don't be discouraged if they don't use the bird feeders, because many of these wild birds do not use feeders. They might be foraging birds, or they might be just looking for insects in the plants and the bushes that you have. There are so many things that you can do immediately in the yard, which is, again, providing water, providing the bird feeders and the food. You can also put out some fruits. Also, another good thing to remember about the food that you're buying from stores is to avoid getting any that has any artificial fillers in there. But don't get discouraged if the wild birds are not coming to your feeders, because many of these wild birds don't. It is not in their nature to go and eat from the bird feeders. They will do what they naturally do, and they will go to the plants, they will find insects, they will find other seeds from the plants, or berries, or fruits that you might have on the plants. So that may be a good reason to have more plants in your landscape, in your garden. And there might be many bird-friendly plants. There was another episode that I did previously on what kind of plants that you can grow in your yard to invite more birds. And growing plants, you might think, well, it's not going to bring the birds right now. And sometimes if things are not happening right away, we tend not to do it. But I would still strongly encourage to go ahead and start planting if you do want to create that habitat. If you do want to invite birds, if you want to make your place a rest area, a good shelter spot when they're migrating, then start growing plants, and you'll be surprised. Within a year or so, you might start to get a few species, and as your garden grows, soon you will have number of species stopping by in your garden. And it is surprising how they spot your garden, even if it is the only one in the neighborhood which has all these native plantings and it's thick with vegetation. They are still able to spot your yard, a small residential yard They can spot it from high above and can stop by, can even nest if they find the conditions are favorable, if the planting, if the vegetations are favorable. So definitely do not underestimate the slow growth, the slow evolution of a garden. It can bring a lot of joy. One more important thing that individually we can do to help these birds is to avoid any pesticides in the garden, because when we avoid pesticides, not only we are avoiding direct harm to these birds by these chemicals, but also we are encouraging a lot of insect population, a diversity of insects that will attract these birds. So it can be a big help to them when we have a wildlife habitat, a good ecosystem, healthy ecosystem going on in our garden. One app that you can use to identify what birds are in your garden, or if you're going outside any place to look for birds, a helpful app that I use is called Merlin. And again, I will leave all these names and links in the show notes. But this app basically can identify the sound of the birds. So you just turn it on, and it captures all the bird sounds, and it can identify the bird. Now, the mockingbird is really smart, and it can occasionally fool this app, but most of the times it is quite accurate. And actually, I remember last year, first time when we had the blue grosbeak come to our yard, just before that, just a few minutes before that, it was the app identifying the bird sound as blue grosbeak, and I dismissed it as, well, it's probably the mockingbird making a sound, and it's just, we've never had a blue grosbeak in our yard. And a few minutes later, this beautiful bird was sitting under the elderberry tree near the water dripper. So that's when I got convinced that the app is definitely helpful. Another resource that is helpful to find out the hotspots in your area is the eBird. The eBird and also the Merlin app, they're both by Cornell Lab of Ornithology. The eBird, you can find out where the hotspots are, because people are putting that information in whenever they have a sighting of a particular bird, and also it will show you what area the bird sighting was done. You can also enter that information if you have a bird sighting, so that it can be helpful to others as well. Specifically for the birds, we also use Audubon. That's also very helpful. We also use the field guides, and there's a Audubon Southwest birding book that is always near our backyard window. I think it's really good for the kids to carry these pocket guides, and you can find this at your local bookstore. You can find it at Barnes & Nobles or order them on Amazon. These are laminated pocket guides you can have and carry with you, especially when going out birding with kids. So to summarize, there are so many things we can do as individuals to help these birds during their migration. More immediately, we can provide them fresh water every day. I have to stress that fresh water is so important, and to clean the bird baths every day is so important, because especially during the warm weather, there are more chances of disease transmission among the birds. So very important to clean those bird baths every day. Also start growing more native plants in your garden so that it can be an inviting place for the birds. And you might start to see the benefit even in a few months. Even during the fall migration, you might see some benefits. But as the garden grows, you will see increasing benefit. You will see birds increasingly using your place as their habitat or as a resting place in their long migration journey. And another good fun activity for us could be to go out in nature. As long as we're not creating a whole lot of crowd, it will be good for birds, because then there will be more incentive for the city or the local region to preserve those sites, because people are showing interest in those sites and preservation of those habitats. Also make use of that wonderful information that is provided by Birdcast Info. And with this, I hope you will have a fun time watching birds this spring and getting the kids also involved in outdoors and nature. That is all for today. Until the next episode, bye for now.